Good afternoon and welcome to the Audit and Risk Committee. First of all, minutes of the last meeting. We all had a chance to have a look at them and may I sign those. Any apologies? Any from the floor? That one too. Any declarations of interest? Right. First report, annual governance statement, page 3 in your pack. Monitoring officer. Take us through that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So each year I bring a report to this committee on the annual governance statement. So the annual governance statement, subject to any comments made today, gets incorporated into the council statement of accounts, which are due to be coming to you in full at your November meeting. So the annual governance statement, as the name implies, really takes an overview of the governance of the council. So looks at all various different elements, including audit, code of conduct issues, the measures we have in place to make sure that we monitor all of those things, to give that assurance both to this committee and to the council as a whole, that those appropriate standards and compliance is in place, and the public money is safeguarded and properly accounted for. Clearly, you know, my finance and audit colleagues have a key role to play there. So the draft AGS is set out as Appendix 1 to your papers, members. I won't go through it in any great detail, but obviously happy to take any questions. I think what I would highlight, it's on page 17 of your pack, is that the overall conclusion of the Chief Internal Auditor was that there was substantial assurance given to the Council for the period covered by the annual governance statement, and that was as a result of the 22 reviews that they carried out in that period. Members will know that you get reports to this committee on any limited assurance report, giving members that opportunity to have that more in-depth look in those issues, and again hopefully receive assurance that things are being progressed there. The conclusion on page 18 states that there are 2 action points. One is implementation of the high-level recommendations, which is in progress and is picked up by the internal audit progress reports that come through to you. And the second one is the issue of revised anti-fraud policy, and members will be aware that is elsewhere on your agenda this afternoon. So we've already picked that up so we can ensure compliance. So when we do next year's statement, obviously that will be on tick on. So Chairman, happy to take any questions, but that the report is for approval of that statement.
Thank you for that, Lorraine. Any questions from the floor? Councillor Evans.
So where it says internal audit, 2 were not rated. Sorry, the one above, 2 were rated limited assurance. Have you got any more background to that one?
Yes, I'll look to Sue to correct me if I get this wrong, but you've got a report elsewhere on your agenda this afternoon on one of the limited assurance reports, and then the other one was around cyber. Yeah, was around the cybersecurity, and that wasn't a vulnerability for us. That was basically a policy issue and embedding that policy, and that has previously been reported to this committee. So, as I say, those limited assurance reports do come before you, so you do have high visibility on them and an opportunity to input into any actions necessary there.
Any other questions? In that case, the recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee support the attached draft annual governance statement. Support that. That brings us on to the quarterly Treasury Management Report. Our Deputy S151 Officer, John Mayhew, is going to take us through this.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Members of this committee will recall receiving the Q4 Treasury Management Report at the June meeting of the Audit and Risk. And prior to that, previous members of this committee received the actual Treasury Management Strategy, upon which this report details progress on the 23rd of March meeting of this committee. The Treasury Management Strategy, in common with, I think, pretty much all public bodies, sets out how the council looks after its money, with three core principles applying, with a hierarchy between them. The first of which being security of our investments, making as certain as you possibly can be that the council is never going to find itself actually losing the principal investment money it invests. And beneath that, we look to seek liquidity, such that whilst money's safe, we can secure it if we need to at relatively short notice. And whilst still important, but nevertheless a third of those three in hierarchical terms, yield, looking to get the best return we possibly can. And the purpose of bringing quarterly reports to this committee is, first of all, that members can be assured that officers at all times adhere to the rules that are set out and approved by yourselves in terms of what the limits are of how much we can invest in particular organisations, which helps to give yourselves further assurance that there's no danger of any breach of those three, but also to report upon the progress made, particularly the things that can vary around the yield in particular. And has been well documented at a number of meetings of this council, the Treasury story over the last years has been a success one. That the borrowing the council undertook primarily to invest in this building and other elements of the capital programme were undertaken approaching 2 years ago when interest rates were extremely low. We borrowed at an average, I think, 1.6% in order to invest. And since then, from our Treasury perspective, we've been able to fortuitously benefit from the ever increasing interest rates, which means, as detailed in this report, we are making improvements against our budgetary position for interest income received this financial year. And that, as members have seen in other reports, overview and scrutiny and so forth, is feeding through to the benefit of the general fund and other priorities that members may wish to address. So it's all good news from that perspective. The other element of this report, members will be aware we don't make our Treasury decisions in isolation. We pay for and get very good advice from a company called Link Services, and they provide us with the detailed appendices that you see in this report around the general economic outlook for the country and worldwide, from which we can second guess to some extent how interest rates, inflation and other important factors may vary in the future, and that informs the next quarter's worth of investment decisions that we may have to make. And that's where we get value from Link Services for the monies that we the subscriptions we pay to them. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Thank you, John. Any members? Any questions from members? Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. I've just got a couple of questions. I'll start with the easier one to read out. It's on the economics that you read out. The advisors said that they seem to have a very pessimistic view of what they forecast is going to happen in the future, which I thought was interesting. It'd be interesting in hearing your take on that. Because since the pandemic, the government and the Bank of England, they are not an expert. They seem to have been quite. They seem to have been more pessimistic than on economic growth. And the other question I had, it was on paragraph 4.2, and it's entitled Annual Investment Strategy and Current Treasury Position. Says the council will aim to achieve the optimum return yield on investments while considering levels of security and liquidity. In the current economic climate, it is considered appropriate to keep investments in the short term to cover short-term cash flow needs, but also to seek out value available in higher rates in periods up to 12 months or in some circumstances beyond, with highly credit-rated financial institutions. Yes, so my question on that will this change as inflation and interest rates rises appear to be stabilising, as if that does materialise and don't see the rise in interest rates, will that investment strategy change? Thank you.
I'll ask John to answer that.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Evans. Always a very interesting question about economic predictions of the future. I don't think our Treasury advisors link are particularly out of kilter to what the Bank of England's thinking themselves is. And that said, we get a Friday update from Link every single week. So their economic predictions are very fluid and can change very markedly, even across a few days. And I'll give a very good example of that. They were actually predicting an 80% chance of an interest rate rise 2 weeks ago, which didn't transpire in the end. Interest rates were held, and they tweaked their forecasts according to that. And as you know, we get different inflation figures that come through periodically and different reflections around those as well. So I think the broad outlook that Link are projecting, which is sluggish growth, and whether or not people actually say that might tip into recession or not, there's only a marginal difference between those. I think their projections that inflation will come down is consistent again with the Bank of England, albeit there's some things about the margins about which inflation will come down. And I think there's a broad consensus that if we haven't reached the peak of interest rates, we've probably only got one more rise at worst likely, albeit I think there's a consensus that interest rates are not going to come down quickly. So I think would be, if there was a massive divergence between what our Treasury advisors are telling us and what the Bank of England are saying, I think we'd be taking 2 paces back and really thinking hard about, okay, who's got this right? The differences are around the margins. So I think they're perhaps slightly more pessimistic than Bank of England, the government saying, but nothing that would change our decision making accordingly and our strategies accordingly. So hope that answers your first question. And really good question again in relation to table 4.2, and it gives you a slight chance to elaborate on table 4.2. When we write about how we look initially to short-term investments, when you see how we've invested our 16.15 million, the federated investors and CCLA are precisely those short-term investments that we can call upon at a day's notice. So we can add to and take away from those pots on a daily basis. And in terms of how the council operates, if we've got a day when we've had, say, one of my accountants today mentioned we've got some business rate income in yesterday, it came in, we've got more money in the bank than we needed, we can put money into these accounts and earn some interest. Equally, if we've got a week in which we have to pay, I mean, it's called the preceptors, our big outgoing, because we collect money on behalf of county council and the police and fire. The big outgoing day each month is when we have to pay our colleagues at county their share of business rates and council tax, and we can take money out of those accounts to make certain that we've got money to do that. And equally, as the officers and every employee the council knows, the end of the month salaries is our other big sort of outlay. So those two things, the 14.85 million money market funds, serve that purpose. Money can come in and out relatively quickly, serves liquidity, we've got money when we need it. The 2 million below is the latter part, whereby those are fixed dates. So we've invested money for the longer term with that bank to be returned to us with interest at a fixed date in the future. So we lose out on liquidity. We haven't got the opportunity, if we want that money quickly, to obtain it. It's contractually bound to that entity until the repayment date arrives. But we benefit, the fact it's long term, they give us a slightly higher interest rate than would otherwise be the case in the top bracket. So we're trying to get a balance between the two, making sure we've always got the ability to get money when we need it, but equally keeping sights on the fact that by having a little bit of money in the longer term investments, we can earn a little bit more money, which benefits the general fund. So hopefully that gives a bit more background to 4.2. But back to your particular question, are recent indications of interest rates causing us to change that strategy? I think the answer is no. That broad strategy, which we set out in our treasury strategy all along, I think actually tries to insulate us from the swings and vicissitudes of the economic climate. And the underlying principles that we looked in the first instance to make sure your money's safe, first and foremost. And underneath that, we've got access to the monies that we need when we need them, secondly. And then only thirdly, do we try to get the best interest rate we possibly can without putting those first two principles at jeopardy. I think those principles and the strategy surrounding those is constant, and changes the economic climate won't change those fundamentals, but the broad strategy remains the same. Individual decisions on a given day might be influenced by changes in interest rates and so forth. And again, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, John. Now do I have a question from Martin?
A quick question, John, in relation to internal investments where we've got a fair sum, but let's say First Abu Dhabi Bank. How secure and safe is that investment, given the recent one on banks as such, and often their rating is AA and minus? What does that really mean, and what safeguards, if any, do we have if that bank were to collapse?
Apologies, Councillor. The investments we make are drawn from a list that our investment advisors Link provide. They give us a list of what they consider to be the premium institutions to invest with, and we wouldn't go off that list that Link provide. So on that basis, I think First Abu Dhabi Bank are as secure from our perspective as it's possible to be. Going back to those principles, the security aspect is our very first element. What would happen? I mean, but I'm going to take your point. Over the history of finance, banks have collapsed, and there's been beyond that. There's been occasions where local authorities have been, in particular, I think the Iceland banks as well as some local authorities. The Western Isles local authority, going back about 20 odd years, they suffered when I think it was Barings Bank. Wow. So it's not inconceivable. But the difference is that Western Isles, when they found there's a bank offering great rates of interest, they put all their monies into that particular bank. And go back to the principles of the Treasury strategy yourselves as members approve, one of the key things is a spread of your assets. And that's one of the and it's precisely, I think, the reason you're alluding to in the question, that whilst you can't give 100% guarantee that any investment, there's no such thing as 100% guarantee. We try and make it as safe as we possibly can. But in the worst case scenario that we woke up tomorrow and found out that one bank that we had invested in had failed and we were at risk at losing that money, at least as an absolute minimum, we'd be able to tell you, but we have got a spread of investments. We didn't have every single penny invested in that one institution, which going back in time was where the Western Isles, you can Google it and so forth, that's where that particular local authority went adrift from the recognised best practice. So I can't offer you 100%, but it comes from a list that Link provide. It's as safe as it can be with that. And given it's not 100%, in the very, very worst case, that's not where we've got all our money. And again, hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, John. I mean, I think probably know the answer to this question. There is no additional risk in investing offshore in foreign banks as opposed to UK banks. It's all much of a muchness as far as the risk. Thanks, John.
Any more questions? I've just got one question. What interest rates are we getting at the moment? The report refers to Bank of England rate going up. What rate are we getting from the banks that we're invested in? And do we ever consider things like government gilts or safe forms of investment? And is there a potential, things we're talking about a large sum of money, benefit in investigating alternatives? Do we ever give that thought? Or...
Yeah, very good question, Chairman. We're getting around about 5.25% at the moment on the averages, if like those short-term investments. When my accountant gives me this is the money we're getting today, it does go very each day. But partly because their investments, as investments they've made are maturing and they're taking on new investments, the average of their investments is creeping up as interest rates have gone up. So the very nice thing, we are finding that the average investment we're getting has gone from sort of 4.75% to 5%, and it's now about 5.25% we're getting on our investments. Government gilts are very interesting. They are, I mean, the word gilt gives the true indication that in terms of the security, they're the most safe investment you can make in terms of security. You will get the coupon money back from the gilt you invest in. The price you pay initially for them, though, and therefore the yield and how that price may vary in the market thereafter can show considerable volatility. And I think we saw that 1 year ago, following the mini budget, like the price of government gilts was extremely volatile. And therefore people holding gilts saw the value of them sort of initially going up and down. Whilst when they get to maturity, the value is guaranteed. In the short term, it can be very volatile. And I think for that reason, and for the reasons of budgeting, I think gilts are a more risky investment than most local authorities would usually enter into. And it's not high up our list of considerations. And again, partly because I think we're doing right now quite nicely as we're doing, investing in sort of blue chip banks with the backing of Link's advice and spreading the investments. I think it's a strategy that is working very, very comfortably for us at the moment. There's no immediate plans to reconsider that, or to advise yourselves to reconsider that.
Thank you for that answer. If there's no more questions on that, go back to the recommendation, which is that the members are asked to note the position as set out in the report. We'll note that. And we move on to item number 6. This is the internal audit progress report. Is Debbie going to take us through this? And it's on page 31 of your pack.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular progress report, which details audit activity carried out since the last Audit and Risk Committee back in July earlier this year. So the first part of this report details the various systems audit plan work that has been carried out. So you'll see at paragraph 3.3 that one audit report has been finalised relating to the energy bill support scheme, and substantial assurance has been given to that piece of work. We also have another piece of audit work that's currently in draft report stage, and that relates to the Disabled Facilities Grants Audit Review. We also have a number of other audits that are in progress at the moment, and we also have some project support work also in progress relating to the VIVUP Employee Benefit Scheme, and we're also working with the digital team as well on some project support work. At 3.5, at the end, at the bottom of page 32 of your pack, you'll see that I refer to the counter fraud plan, and in particular, we do have our programme of continuous controls monitoring work, which we refer to as CCM. This is where we use the council's data and we do our own internal data matching to highlight various red flags and various potential transactions just for further investigation. Normally, they won't produce anything of any concern, but also that does give you positive assurance where we don't have any concerns that all our internal controls are operating correctly. So we've done our CCM work up until August 2023. We've looked at creditor payments and mileage claims, and there are no adverse findings to date. We're also currently doing some data matching in relation to purchase card transactions against our absence data. And that is really to check that when people are off sick or off on annual leave, that they're not putting their card maybe in a safe for somebody else to use, because that card should only be used by the card holder. So it's trying to spot where there are sort of weaknesses in practice, really. We've also matched some council tax data as well to the electoral roll, and that's really just to verify the various council tax exemptions and discounts to make sure that they have been appropriately applied. And our counter fraud manager has been liaising with the revenues manager in relation to those initial findings. And again, once those data matches have been progressed, we'll report back to this committee with the outcome of the results of that. We also take part, because it is mandatory, in the National Fraud Initiative. So this is a 2-yearly exercise. So back in October last year, we sent off a range of data sets to the Cabinet Office. That's done very securely using the Cabinet Office's database system. And then back in January, February this year, we received back some potential matches. You can see those matches at 3.8 in the table, where we've currently got 433 matches to review. Those matches have been disseminated to the various services across the council, and they will be investigated during the course of the year. We have around about 9 months to progress those matches, and it's picked up by the services as and when time allows. At the bottom of page 33 of your pack, you will see that I do refer to a new special investigation referral. As this is a public meeting, I can't say too much about the details at the moment. However, unfortunately, there was a series of cash thefts at a leisure centre back in the summer this year. It was pleasing to note actually that it was picked up by the finance team as part of their normal internal reconciliation processes. We were notified, the counter fraud manager was notified, and very promptly we liaised with the police, who dealt with the matter very quickly. They're currently undertaking their own police investigation at the moment, and that is running in parallel with the council's own internal investigation. Once the outcome of that is known and we will report back the full report to you later on in the year. But at this moment, hopefully you appreciate, because it's ongoing, we can't give too much details at the moment. So, Chair, that is it in relation to the progress report. Happy to take any questions in relation to that.
Thank you for that. Any questions? In that case, thank you very much for the report. And it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of the police investigation is. Thank you very much, Debbie. Right, moving on, we go to item number 7, approval of the counter fraud and corruption policy. Yes, Lorraine's going to take us through this, and it's on page 35 of your pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say this is all absolutely pre-planned, because there's lots of linkages between the items on your agenda today. Obviously Deb's mentioned about a fraud issue, the ADS, and then the fraud policy. It was obviously clearly planned and not a fortuitous outcome of timing. So the counter fraud plan, the council has had a counter fraud plan in place, a policy in place for a number of years. But as with all our policies, we look to refresh them on a regular basis. It was identified in the annual governance statement the need to refresh that this year, and therefore it's before members this afternoon for your consideration. So the objective of the policy is to confirm that in administrating its aims and responsibilities, the council is committed to deterring fraud and corruption. And the policy is set out at appendix 1 of your papers, members. If I could just take you down to page 41 of the pack, you'll see there that at 1.4 it references in the policy that the policy is a key element of the council's overall corporate governance arrangements, which aim to ensure that the council is well managed and does the right things in the right way for the right people in a timely, inclusive, open, honest and accountable way. So as I said, there are clear linkages here between the annual governance statement, this and other policies, and the work that Debbie mentioned as part of the audit work. So the policy, includes a number of definitions you'd expect to do, and really sets out the council's approach to both monitoring for but tackling fraud as well. Key to that is the culture of the council. And on page 46, it addresses and sets out the approach of the council on that culture. And the culture and ethics of the council are ones of honesty, openness in all of its dealings, with opposition to fraud and corruption. And indeed, all of the members and the staff of the council play an important part in creating and maintaining that culture. Part of that is also the council's whistleblowing policy, which came to this committee last year, I think now, for updating. Again, that's one that will be coming back to you again, probably next year now for a further refresh. But that whistleblowing policy clearly links with the fraud policy, and the whistleblowing policy seeks to ensure that those officers raising concerns know that they will be treated seriously and their concerns are properly investigated in a confidential and impartial manner. So a clear linkage between those policies we've both come before this committee for consideration. Just moving on then, the policy on page 51 sets out the role of this committee in relation to counter fraud matters. As it says there, this committee is responsible for monitoring the council's strategies and policies and considering the effectiveness of arrangements, both for counter fraud and whistleblowing. Also responsible for setting and monitoring the internal audit plan and for approval of the annual governance statement. So as I say, clear linkages with a number of items on your agenda this afternoon and really bringing it together in that picture, overall picture, and the important role that this committee plays within that to ensure that the council remains safe and fraud free. So the recommendation is that the members approve the policy as set out at Appendix 1, but happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions? Martin.
Thanks, Lorraine. Quick one around the fraud policy. Is there any compulsory training that employees need to go through to accept the due process and understand what the expectations are of them? Compulsory training that they are signing off that you can see they've actually taken it?
Yep.
Yes, it's, I don't think we actually class it the mandatory training, but we do have a training module within our suite of training modules for officers, and all new employees are required to undertake that suite of training modules as part of their induction. Subject to members' approval of the policy today, that will kind of trigger a refresh of that, if you like, with our officers. So obviously, if you approve the policy, that will then be issued out to all of our officers. It will be made available on the website, and we'll pick up on that as part of the need. We'll look back at the training and make sure that officers are aware. As I said, there was no significant changes to the policy, so it wouldn't necessarily be a complete refresh of the training, but certainly it would trigger that kind of conversation around the need to be aware of it.
Thank you. Any more questions? The only thing I'd say is the part of that, the whistleblowing policy, and that the distribution, making sure people are aware of it, particularly the whistleblowing, never seem to have very little come back through it. To publicise it, really.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. What will happen is, if this is approved, as again, members will be aware, we've had a complete refresh of our website over the last few months. I think we'd have to say that as a result of that, some of our key policy documents may have lost visibility on the website. Certainly, we'll be looking to reintroduce those and make sure they have that high visibility on the website.
Thank you for that. The recommendation is that we make the revisions to the policy. Yes. Thank you. Now then, we come to the exclusion of the press and public. And I've got to say, to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item, on the grounds that they are likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of the Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. Right. Here we come to the review of the internal audit report on debtors and debt recovery.
If you just pause while I stop the recording.